as an example there. Jessica's recording this. Stephen, you're a panelist here, so you're good. What else do you need to know? Stephen in the house. So this is our guest presenter here today. I'll introduce him here in a few seconds, but should be good. What else? Things that are coming up. If you're in Slack and Promo Standards land, Amy has posted a few times looking for volunteers. So check the general channel. We're looking for a few volunteers, both with future event planning. We're going to be firing up a work group for the 2024 Tech Summit, which is in February of 24 on the beach in Florida, which would be awesome. I know Becky's going to head up the virtual Tech Summit, which is going to be in the early fall. So scroll back up a little bit through the general channel. You'll find Amy's post where she calls out looking for some volunteers, and we'll it looks like back on March 28th, she had a few of them. We're also looking to launch a technology mentorship program within Promo Standards. So we're partnering with another nonprofit in the industry, Promo Kitchen, who runs a pretty awesome mentorship program. So if you want to kind of work with us as we flush that out this year and officially launch it at the end of the year, you can do that. So not going to spend any more time. We're going to hop right into this thing today. So what are we doing here today? This is the official, we'll call it a release party, our first release during an education session. We tend to, all future releases, we're going to do in this manner. We'll hijack the education of the month, which is the third Tuesday of every month, 2 o'clock Eastern. And we're going to do a kind of a deep dive, walk through the standard. We'll tend to have somebody from the standards committee review this and kind of pitch it out to the audience. Use the Q&A and the chat to kind of chime in if you have questions along the way. Either myself, Stephen, or looks like some of the crew from the standards committee is actually here on the call. They can chime in as well. And then at the end, like I said, we'll do a quick walkthrough of, if you are a supplier, how to post your endpoint to Promo Standards. If you're a distributor or service provider or consumer of said data, how to find that information and get connected with the new service. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker this month. Our guest speaker is Stephen Stanley. Stephen has been a longtime OG of Promo Standards. He serves on the board of Promo Standards, one of our distributor members. He's the guru of technology at ePromo. He was a dev from way back when, doing early integrations in the industry. I connected with him many moons ago, doing some, pretty cool stuff back in the day. He's been a, early adapter of every Promo Standard service that's come along. So he's seen it all from a hands-on perspective. He's implemented it all. And he is actually a member of our standards committee as well. So he's pretty plugged in the Promo Standards world. And today he's going to, hammer all good things, order shipment notification 2.0. And with that said, Stephen, it's all you. I'm gonna turn my camera off and you can do this party here.
All right, thanks, John.
Yep.
All right, everyone. I'm gonna dive in here and talk about a little bit of order shipment notification 2.0. And just get my slides up here. So, let's dive into where we're at here with the cycle of the Promo Standards. Order shipment 2.0 was kind of a need to get us up to snuff with the other standards that have come out since then. Inventory, order status, and order shipment notification came out very early on and haven't had some major updates in a long time. And with things like the product data, the purchase order, and the PPC all having some more updated standards, as well as some different enumerated fields, it was time to go back and look at order shipment notification and build the 2.0 version of this. So to get a request started, we actually have a formal process for requesting a standard, and this was completed and presented by John to the board. And then from there, the standards committee moved forward to build out the standard. The purpose of this was to update the standard, as I mentioned, and make it align with the PO standard and the capabilities and add capabilities that came from feedback from end users that was missing from the original standard. With every request, there's a background to the story, and the main piece here is, we had purchase order information and we have order shipment notifications for those purchase orders. So let's make sure that they align and make sure that they have the same pieces of information, and that all the pieces of tracking a package and what items are in what packages is clear and easy to ascertain from the standard itself. We had some requirements. It needed to align with the PO standard. It needed to be clear what was being shipped. It needed to update the enumerations, and we still wanted to keep it as a pull service in general, so that it was very similar to the standards that we have now, and not cause a major change to the standard. Our part of the request had a definition of success, really just looking to make sure that we could be more granular in the details for the distributors and service providers and knowing what actually shipped. So the author of our lovely order shipment notification 2.0 is Steve Lucer, from Vice President of Essent. You can see a little fun picture there of the standards committee actually meeting in Tampa and working on some of these standards. I believe they were working on the order status 2.0 in that photo. But let's dive into the actual request. You'll notice that it's not much different than the request for 1.0. It's been cleaned up a little bit to make sure that it matches the documentation from other standards, and it's a little bit easier to read. But all the requests will be very similar to exactly what you're doing now, and shouldn't need a lot of change from the distributor or service provider side. The main structure looks very similar to 1.0, except for you'll see some name changes. Something that we called shipment locations in 1.0 is now called shipments. And in those shipments is where you'll have all of the addresses and shipment details, as well as which packages, the full package array and which packages were in that shipment. Every purchase order can have multiple sales orders. Every sales order can have multiple shipments, and every sales order and every shipment can have multiple packages. So really just a cleanup of the names and a few added fields. Otherwise, it's very similar to the 1.0 standard. One thing to notice here is when we do get into the purchase order piece, the sales order array is now required. That was not required in the 1.0 version documentation, but you do need to have a sales order array in order to have the package information. The sales order object, having that it be shipped in full, and the sales order number and the shipment array were all true in the last standard, but the overall sales order array was not required. So that's the big change here. Otherwise, it's just some naming convention changes for the most part. In the shipment array, we can see here a breakdown of some of the address, the ship to and the ship from address, as well as the destination shipped in full. and if it was customer pickup or not, as well as the shipment destination type. So if it was commercial versus residential, that kind of information can be passed back to allow for, better quoting to customers down the road. The package array has some things broke out with the carrier and the service, much like the PO standard. So you can actually say that it's UPS ground instead of having that all be one field as before. The tracking number, the ship date, the dimensions, the dimension weight, all of these things are things that have been there in the past. We do have pre-production proof field on this. This is an enumerated field and the pieces that can be used there are yes, no, and unknown. In the items array, we have the supplier information as well as the distributor information for the product and the part, and how much was actually shipped for that item in this package. And the purchase order line number ties back to the purchase order, so that you actually know the exact line number that was being referenced there. I mentioned that the enumerations changed. This is to bring us back in line with more of the other standards out there. You'll recognize the quantity unit of measure looks a lot like the quantity unit of measure that you would see on the PO standard as well as the PPC standard. Dimension unit of measure hasn't changed much, but it is more standard, it's more uniform with the other standards. And there's that pre-production proof type that I mentioned before of yes, no, and unknown. Some general guidance that we made sure was in the standard. It was if you could not determine how many of an item was actually shipped on a specific tracking number due to system limitations, it's the guidance from the promo standards would be to attach all the products and quantities to a single tracking number and leave the other tracking numbers without products or quantities. This just makes it a little bit easier to know that you have multiple tracking numbers, but you don't necessarily have the ability to put in the further detail that's being added in the 2.0 spec. And we wanted to make sure that people could continue to do that and use the service, even though they didn't have that ability to get that granular. So I'm going to just ping everyone right here if there's any questions or anything that anyone has had in the group. If you want to throw those into the Q&A or the chat, let us answer some questions for you. I have a couple more slides, but just wanted to make sure that we are making sure I cover everything that everyone needs to hear today. Some key takeaways from the order shipment notification 2.0 is that the structure is more in line with the other services as well as the PO spec. There are more required fields. There's more detailed field descriptions, which is not a major change, just some naming and structure changes from 1.0 to 2.0. It's easier to identify products and parts. There's clarity on how a product is being shipped when you can separate those carrier and service fields. The larger set of enumerated values, and that it's still a pull service, meaning us, make our Helping us meet our objective back in the RFC. All right, we've got a couple questions here. So there is for a sandbox environment, there would be something that you could set up yourself, as well as suppliers that set up the endpoints typically have a test URL. And I think John's going to go over that in a little bit. Which package should? So yes, you should put those on the first item. You put all the quantity and item information on the first item, and then put the other tracking numbers just in as shipment packages. Is the main guidance we were trying to give on that last slide.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's probably not, probably less than 50-50 of suppliers knowing what's in every single box, right? It's kind of dirty, right? We know that there's 10 boxes and 100 units. You would assume that the math is always total quantity divided by boxes, but if it's 101 units and there's 11 boxes, right? Naturally, a human's going to look at that and know that there's 10 boxes of 10 and 1 box of 1, but we don't, as suppliers there, I don't know, we don't Starlink record that information, right? So it's a tough, some people can back into the math and just swag, the pieces, or some people will infer it based off the carton weight, that if there's, call it 100 pounds and 100 units, then you can just assume that every unit is a pound, but it doesn't always work out so clean. So, I'd say if you don't have that data, put all those details in the first, what I guess is traditionally called in the shipping world, the lead package. And that one will, carry the details. But at the same time, OSN 2.0 has that ability to get more granular and divide, both locations, quantities, what's in each specific box, because a lot of the apparel suppliers have that level of detail. I think where this matters more is those people who are trying to, I don't know if I'd recommend this, rate packages based off of OSN. If you know specific package, dims and weights, you could start to play that game. So it's a good question, though.
Yeah, it is a way to use some of that information that comes back about dimensions, is you can start to try and learn, how suppliers might package your items to ship out at different quantities, even if you're not getting that in the product data necessarily. You might be only getting 1 box size back. There's some ways that you might be able to use some of the information if it's provided, but it's one of those things that it's not part of the standard necessarily, but it is something that you could look into as a distributor. Live today on promostandards.org, thanks to John, we have the order shipment notification validation for 2.0, as well as the WSDL and documentation. Back on one of my first slides, there was a number 2 next to OSN 2.0 for 2 live endpoints. Starline and HIT have live endpoints for order shipment notification 2.0, and those are live today.
All right. You good here, Stephen? So
yeah, I burned through that, John. So
all right. So yeah, no, that's good. So one of the things that, a few things we're going to point out here, I'm going to walk everybody through here in a second how to find this information Stephen was just talking about, because we get a ton of questions on where endpoints are listed, how to post endpoints, how to find them, how to, there was a question even here about a sandbox. So we're going to talk about that. And then we just kind of recap Stephen's talk there. The biggest thing was we've been trying to do this level setting of standards, which is, what we call 2.0. There is a order stats 2.0 that is very, very close to being ready. It's just in its final stages of testing and development. But this level setting is, you have to think back, OSN 1.0 was developed 2016, 2017. It was the third standard developed after inventory and order status. So like Stephen mentioned, there was a whole set of enumerations. We weren't really doing enumerations back in OSN 1.0. So it was kind of, values were a bit of the wild, wild west. And we didn't have that PO line item tied back to the standard. So it was a big, we kind of call it standardizing the standards and level setting. Is, there was things of the past that we wish we would have done better. And a lot of it is, and you'll see it with order status as well. It's tying, now that we have this PO standard and product data standard, is ensuring that the early and initial standards created by promo standards were compatible with product data and purchase orders. Because at the end of the day, those are the two heavy lifters of the transactional piece. So, while it can seem somewhat minor from a jump, there's a lot of, I guess, documentation is clear. It follows, if you've implemented anything from product data 2.0, PPC, product purchase order, invoice, those standards, you saw a transition of, I guess, growing of the organization. So we want to make sure that we honed in that. And, there's not a lot attractive about shipping data and tracking data. It's very, cut and dry, but, there's the minor things of splitting out service levels, splitting out, carriers. Those things for people who are implementing matter. One of the things that you'll know is, and we'll post this in the Slack channel, is we record every education session and all of it gets posted to Slack. Where if you go to our YouTube channel, which we'll post a link, all those videos are public, so you can scroll back through past history. So Erica actually just chimed in Slack saying she couldn't make it. Good news is everything's recorded and we're going to post it there. So one of the things that I'm going to share my screen here and walk everybody through, since this really is in the, kind of like to steal from the NFL, the modern era of promo standards, right? From where we grew out of, the old days and into a membership organization. We really haven't gone through the mechanics of a service launch before. It's kind of, we've been walking through a lot of the future changes, but you're going to see, and this is a good opportunity to show everybody when a launch happens, what are the steps? How do we get the word out? How do we, communicate who has what? So we're going to hone in on that. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's do this. Bear with me here. So, all right, there we go. All right, so this is promostandards.org, right? Promostandards.org. One thing you'll notice from up here at the top, I am logged in. When you're not logged in, you are missing content. This actually, I think Joel might have asked this question about a week ago. There's a lot of people wondering, where do I get the endpoint listing? Endpoint listing is a member benefit. So is as far as documentation. All this stuff is out in the wild, but to get direct access to endpoints, so this resources menu does not show up when you're not logged in. As soon as you log in, you get a whole host of things that show up. You get the member section, which has our member directory. And most importantly, you get a few things here, which I think is the meat and potatoes of the tech of promo standards, right? So if you're last week or last month, Jay from Samar talked about best practices. So there's a few links down here that hone into everything he was talking about as that committee walks through promo standards best practices. What we're going to talk about here is a few things, right? So let's first go. We have an endpoint listing, which is the whole, we tend to call it, I guess, sell it short of calling it the phone book. Promo standards services and documentation. So this is what services are out there. How do I get the documentation? And then there's a validator. So real quick, let's start here on services and documentation. So you click this. If your browser is janky like mine, it doesn't redirect. So you just kind of click here and you go through. Just kind of some about this thing. So what does it redirect you to tools at promostandards.org? So just kind of some inside information here, because it is a kind of a member presentation. Promostandards.org is hosted on a membership tool powered by Wild Apricot, which has since been bought by some larger entities in the CRM world. But Wild Apricot has some limit. It's great for managing membership and being your content management system. But once you try to do anything custom, it's very, very limited. So, you do get this redirect over here to this subdomain, which is tools at promostandards.org. This is where we have our custom, quote unquote, phone book, and we have a little bit more flexibility into the integrations and what we can do in terms of displaying content and displaying standards. So the link back on the main site brings you to here. So what is this? Current promo standard service listing. This is, and you will notice here, if you go there today, order ship notification 2.0, and we are officially today listing this as a production service. So you'll kind of see, so there's a few statuses here. We used to list beta services in the service listing. We've gotten away from that because there was some, what was it, in media content 1.0. Things got out in the wild too early, and we were causing a little bit of chaos when people were early adopting and we weren't quite ready. So we've decided to, I guess, mature as an organization and only officially post services when they're actually ready to go. This thing has been peer reviewed. It's been in beta for months. Membership has voted on it to advance it and push it through to the organization. So there's some formalities of what it takes now to get a standard from what Stephen mentioned earlier as the RFS, which is a request for standard, to an actual production ready standard. So OSN 2.0 or shipment notification, for those of you who are keeping tabs of the abbreviations, it's here. So a few things. So you can either view it, which brings you to a pretty much a cut, copy, paste of the Word document. So if you're just curious to kind of get a quick browse through, Stephen Loser from Essent was the main author, and then the Promo Standards Standards Committee really helped collaborate to bring this thing to fruition. But if you're just curious of scrolling through all the just basic details of gathering requirements of what you're in for, that's all posted here. But back probably if you're a dev or analyst or somebody who's really going to dive into the details, this download here downloads a file which contains a Word document of the documentation, contains the WSDL, contains all the XSDs. It contains everything that you might possibly need to implement this service. So every promo standard service has these two components, right? It either has the basic documentation, which is the view only, and then the meat and potatoes, which is your XSDs, WSDL, and anything that you might need in terms of documentation, all comes along for the ride there with the download. A few things you'll see just in terms of statuses. When we do deprecate a service, we'll post it here and leave it here, probably for perpetuity. Eventually, some of these things will be sunset. I think there's 2 or 3 people left on inventory 1.0, which I would say is borderline broken. So there was, we're still working on the life cycle of services. And essentially, what does that mean? It means when promo standards stop supporting them. What does support mean? It means that the standards committee no longer will accept RFSs, will no longer list them on the site, right? So basically, I guess the big question that probably a lot of people are asking, because there are 100+ endpoints of order shipment notification 1.0, what's going to happen to 1.0? You'll see, let's just take a use case here, product data. There's 2.0 and 1.0. The big difference between these two obviously was the pricing. The basic 4-column website display only pricing was included in 2.0. Product data 1.0 is still around. So you don't panic today thinking that, promo standards is going to deprecate 1.0. In general, it's got to be right for every organization, what they think is going to compel them to upgrade. I would say for those of you who are especially suppliers, if you have purchase order endpoints, product data endpoints, I would highly encourage you to upgrade to shipment notification, because it helps consumers, distributors, service providers close that loop, right? For people who are pulling your shipping tracking information, trying to figure out what has and hasn't shipped, this is the biggest piece of information I think they're going to need. It's so less dirty to be able to get that and make that connection. Hold on, I'm going to come back here and share my screen again. 2 seconds. Supposed to load. All right, sweet. So that's the service listing, right? So as you can see, if you go there, hit this link yourself from promostandards.org, OSN 2.0 officially launched. So what else is there, right? So the next thing is that, we like to call the old phone book. Where is this guy? All right, so the other piece, back to promo standards, resources. So we looked at the services and documentation section. We want to go to promo standards endpoints. Also, my browser hates this link as well, because Wild Apricot doesn't like the redirects. This is the all-encompassing endpoint listing, right? If you were a phone book, this is what it is. This is 50 times 47. Somebody do that math quick. 50 times 47. That's the 2,350 endpoints that promostandards.org list are all right here in one friendly place. Most importantly, if you come in here and search, hit promotional products, you will notice right here, Raj has been nice enough to quickly post HIT's OSN service. So it tells you that, by supplier who has what posted, what their status is. You can view the endpoint URLs. You can view the WSDL link, the test WSDL link. And then most importantly, which we get this a lot, if you're like, hey, Raj, I don't have HIT credentials yet. I want to come in here and request credentials. I can click that real quick. I'm just going to hop over here, be a bit self-serving. You'll see here, Starline also has order shipment notification posted. So if you have, if you already have existing HIT or Starline credentials, you can go out there, grab this WSDL, and then start consuming today and test your data live in production. If you're a distributor, service provider, consumer, whatever you want to call yourself. If you don't have credentials and you're like, I'd like to figure this, I would say 99.9% of all suppliers use a unified set of credentials. They don't do endpoint level credentials. I think I know of one supplier that does that. Shame on them. So you can come in here, request credentials. But here's what we want to do. So we're going to log in here in a second, and I'm going to show you, if you are a supplier, what to do in terms of how to post this onto your specific supplier account. So you're going to, obviously be all jonesed up to implement OSN 2.0. And then you're going to say, well, how do I go and manage my endpoints? So in the top right over here, what you saw there is, sorry, I'll go back to this. There's this login. So logging in, let's talk about this. So remember when I talked about Wild Apricot and their CMS. So what we've done is we've integrated with their single sign-on, and this site uses the Wild Apricot login. So your promostandards.org membership login is your login to manage your endpoints. If you're a distributor or service provider, you really don't need a login here. This is primarily to manage your endpoints and to manage your services that you have. So we're going to do mine as Starlines because that's what my login is tied to. So I'm going to fill this in. So what this does kind of brings you to, you see the URL up here. It's the Wild Apricot, the OAuth client for Wild Apricot. Hopefully this works. So I suck. All right, so here's what we did. So now you'll see I am logged in. You see my pretty picture up there in the top right. So I'm logged in to be able to, as a supplier, manage my endpoints. And I did that using my promostandards.org membership login credentials. Okay, that's important because in the old days, you had a separate login, but we've used the OAuth single sign-in functionality from promostandards.org to be able to do this. So when you log in as a supplier, you're going to see this thing, my company, right? So here I am. You're going to go along on this ride with me on the Starline page. So, just click your icon up on the top right, you get a list of menus of things you can do. So most importantly, I'm going to just walk through, there's some contacts here. This is probably important if you're, I guess, when it comes to what drives this is when there is a request for credentials, the contacts and users are the people that get CC'd on the email. So you see my kind of some people from my team here, some of our contacts, myself, an inside salesperson. Most importantly, what you want to do here is you have contacts, your basic company information. You want to hit new endpoint, right? New endpoint's pretty easy. What service type? OSN, service version 2.0, status. All right, so let's talk about statuses. There isn't an official process for saying that your endpoint is in production review, waiting for review. Something that we'll probably as an organization have to flush out. My general advice, if your endpoint it hasn't been tested or implemented by anybody, please don't post it here as in production. We don't want people consuming garbage endpoints. So, if it's been tested, if somebody's consumed it and it's verified that you adhere to the standard, PromoStandard is going to eventually have to tackle the validation and I guess certification issue, and that's on our roadmap, but it's not there yet. So give us a bit of time to tackle that. So, I listed mine as in production. You list your live URL and your test URL. Not everybody has a staging dev environment. I would encourage you to. And I would also encourage you, if you're going to do this, keep some current data on there because everybody's going to go in, and especially with OSN, there's a date range filter. So you're going to want to hit that up. So go in there, type in your URL, hit save. I'm going to hit cancel here because we don't need to do this. So then you'll see it show up down here as a supplier order shipment notification. Here's my production service, and here's my staging service. And then if you flip back over, that's how it shows up here, OSN 2.0. So if you're following along, that's how it works. And if you're curious here and you want to request credentials, you come in here, click this little, the lock person, I guess we can't say guy, person next to the icon, and roll with it. So what it does is says, hey, your request from Starline, OSN 2.0. This is me requesting for myself, so it's a bit janky. So it goes through and says, hey, you can submit credential requests through the site. So we're currently trying to clean up the process for authentication credentials. I get it that it's painful, how to get credentials, and some suppliers don't respond. So we have this is on the level of importance and within PromoStandard's land in terms of board, in terms of our strategic roadmap committee, in terms of everybody is hyper focused on making credentialing better. It's not great because remember I said that number earlier today, 2,350 endpoints. There's a lot of endpoints. There's 450 suppliers of endpoints, and we have to get better at handling endpoint authentication. Now, flashback, we can't necessarily, PromoStandard is not an identity service. I'm not sure we want to be. So we're going to tackle this, and we're going to make it Will we make it perfect? But not, but we're going to get closer. All right, so last thing here, this question came up. Is there a sandbox environment? Sorry, I'm clicking on a million tabs. So in the resources tab, you get this web service validator. So is there a sandbox? Yes, essentially. If you click that link, what you get is a kind of a dev, BA friendly test environment to validate. It validates structure. It validates that your XSD, your WSDLs meet what's published on promostandards.org. So what you do if you're testing your own or you're testing somebody else's, you come in here and select one of the endpoints, member only hack here. Things tend to get added in here very early in the cycle because we test them internally as well. So you'll see things that probably shouldn't show up in here, but they do. So you can, take that for what it's worth. So order ship notification 2.0 is in here, right? So OSN 2.0. If there's multiple operations, they're listed here. OSN is fairly basic. It only has one operation, which is to get order ship notifications. You'll take star lines or hits, URL. Hopefully in the coming days and weeks, you'll get many, many more. You fill out some basic parameters, which is, you fill out your web service version, ID, password. I'm not going to scroll over because I had to plunk in somebody's username and credentials here. So forgive me there. Then you hit validate. And what it does is it pretty much says, is your response valid? Yes or no. And it gives you a full list of, it gives you a stack, the whole response for whatever parameters you pumped in here. So as Steven said earlier, the carrier and service, this is a UPS ground. This particular package here is 2.2 pounds. For those of you who are shipping gurus, know that decimals on weights don't matter. They round up to the nearest pound. So 2.1 and 2.2 is the same thing as 3. But it goes through, this is a commercial address, not a residential address. It fills out all the details for where it shipped from and everything you need to know. So let's kind of bring this back to earth here. So there is an OSN 2.0 that has been level set to match the most recent standards. It is live on promostandards.org. If you're a supplier, you can post your endpoint as soon as you adopt it. If you're a distributor or service provider or consumer, you can hit a few of the endpoints that are already listed today. You can test them here in the validator. I think we've covered it all. So I'm gonna stop sharing here. I know we have a few minutes here. If there's any questions, you can put them in the chat now. If not, I'll kind of wrap this up here over the course of the next few minutes. So there is a question here. What are we gonna do? Suggestions, anonymous. I love when people don't want to go on the record. As some endpoints are optional some fields are optional with the endpoint. Some suppliers may or may not implement a feature. It would be a good idea to have a supplier notes for each endpoint to explain anything specific about the endpoint and how they implement. Yes, I don't disagree with this. And I also, if you've done education sessions in the past, especially with PO, I would encourage suppliers themselves to host and have an onboarding document, right? I think, yes, it's a great piece of feedback is you need to know what you do and don't support. So Promo Standards is about to tackle something similar with this. We are, I think, I don't have to spill the beans here. I think Eric might have mentioned it in February when we were in Tampa. There's a company, I'm going to call it the wrong thing. Essentially a company information service that is going to allow suppliers to post an endpoint that essentially goes out and it's like, this is, Starline, this is our address, this is the FOB points we support, this is our shipping carrier methods, that company information data that level sets, things that you really should know before you consume. I'll talk to the standards committee about, is there a home in there for explanations or notes of endpoints that are posted. We're trying to get away from the reliance of a phone book and use technology to our advantage to be able to address these things. So it's called, yes, the company information service. Erica just chimed in. That if we can get suppliers to, in a structured manner, post all of their data and nuances in that manner, then it allows distributors, service providers, consumers to have an electronic means for consuming that information without sending somebody to a 2,500 endpoint directory and hoping for the best. But if that's not in the immediate radar, we'll definitely take that feedback and see what we can do with it. That's a good question. Anything else before I wrap this up? Yeah, one of the things, and I don't know if this in. So yeah, so one of the things going forward, you know, if there is, and Stephen touched on this a little bit, there's an RFS process. So members have the ability to chime in, and you know, many of you have run into standards committee members over the course of your tenure here, and you can throw it in the general channel as well. We're flushing out that company information service now. So if there's things like this question here that was just asked, if there's pieces of information that you'd like to see, that thing is in active development, right? The standards committee is, you know, actively in Jira and Bitbucket, changing and updating those specs as we speak. So we'd love to see feedback on data elements for both the company information service or anything. You know, I think what we just heard here, we probably wouldn't have included. I think it's a great, you know, would at least take under consideration and see how we can standardize that information. So, you know, if, you know, you'll see, you know, as we publish to members more roadmap information in the coming future here, you know, we welcome feedback early on. Early on feedback tends to nearly always make its way in the standard. What sucks is getting feedback 3 months after something goes live, right? Because there was a 6-year gap between OSN 1.0 and 2.0. So, you know, I think we're trying to get better at iterations, but we also respect companies' investments into the standards. We don't want to change just to change. We're going to change when the timing is right and when we think that it needs to be done. This one needed to be done to level set it with purchase orders and level set it with product data. It's kind of a bit of a gap between 1.0 and 2.0. Anything else before I round this thing up here? All right, so remember, third Tuesday of every month. Becky, you can remind me what next month is. I want to say we're going to focus on service providers. We're going to walk through. We have a new service provider committee. I think we're going to, you know, walk through some of the offerings that we have there. If you're looking for volunteer opportunities, getting involved in our mentorship program that we're trying to launch, getting involved in future tech summit planning, and getting involved in future hackathon planning. If you have any desire to have input early on, right? We're 10 months away from some of these things happening. Now's the time. We'll take whatever help we can get. I'm assuming with this group here who attended the webinars, it's going to be good help, because they tend to be our most engaged volunteers and members. So hit up myself, Amy, Becky Ellis. You'll see her. She's in Slack. She works for SanMar. Becky's was huge, kicking off the hackathon. She's heading up a lot of our education stuff now. So hit up any of us. We'll get you plugged in, guaranteed, because we want, you know, the help. Any feedback we'll always take. So with that said, thank you everybody for attending. Third Tuesday every month, 2 p.m. Eastern. This will be posted probably in 48 hours into our YouTube channel. So if you missed it, or you want to share it with your comrades or your colleagues, it's the way to go. So have a good day, and you get 12 minutes back of your day. So thank you, everybody. It's been real.